Welcome to Preservation Oaks, the podcast where we invite you to step away from the bustle of everyday life. Settle in and relax, and take a moment to leave the familiar behind as we explore the hidden gems of America that preserve our cultural past. We call them our Preservation Oaks, and with each episode, we'll journey to a different corner of the country, where we'll discover the unique histories, landscapes, and communities that make up our nation. We'll visit with local museums, historical and genealogical societies. They are the stewards of these stories. They preserve the legacy of each place like precious pieces of fabric in a quilt that binds the freedom-loving, hardworking people in this country together. So, slow down, grab a beverage, open your mind, and let us take you on a tour of the fascinating histories and heartfelt traditions that lie just beyond the horizon. This is Preservation Oaks, where every story is a stitch in the fabric of our shared culture. Now, join our host, Sean Radcliffe, as he uncovers another thread in the tapestry of America's heritage and what it takes to preserve it.
Previously on Preservation Oaks.
In Part 1 of Episode 123, we began in 1926, when crime had faces, names, and reputations that spread through newspapers and word of mouth.
In the 1930s, the nation responded, building federal systems to confront organized crime. By the 1950s, crime moved into the shadows of respectability and influence. The 1960s and 70s brought fracture, unrest, and the rise of intelligence and surveillance. And by the 1980s and 90s, crime had scaled into complex financial systems, often hidden behind layers of institutions and global transactions. In Episode 123, Part 2, we step into a new era. Now, here's Sean Radcliffe for more.
Hey, welcome back to Preservation Oaks, where history lives and voices echo through time. I am your host, Sean Radcliffe, coming to you once again from exciting and beautiful Salt Lake City, Utah, where the past and present meet in powerful and sometimes unexpected ways. This is part 2 of our special episode, From Bootleggers to Bureaucracy, the history of crime, 1926 to 2026. In part 2, the nature of crime changes again, not just in scale, but in form. Crime becomes digital. It becomes instantaneous, and increasingly, it becomes invisible. We'll explore how the internet reshaped the criminal landscape in the 2000s and 2010s, how in the 2020s entire systems, financial, governmental, and technological, have themselves become targets. We'll ask one of the most important questions of our time. What happens when artificial intelligence is used not only to fight crime, but to commit it? And we'll examine the growing necessity of international cooperation in a world where crime no longer recognizes borders. Finally, we'll step back and reflect on what this full century of change tells us, not just about crime, but about ourselves, our systems, and the future we're all building. So settle in, because the account you're about to hear is not just about criminals and law enforcement. It's about complexity. It's about systems, and it's about the challenge of understanding a criminal world that is becoming more layered and harder to see clearly. This is Preservation Oaks, Episode 123, Part 2 of From Bootleggers to Bureaucracy, History of Crime, 1926 to 2026. Let's dive in.
Part 6. The 2000s through the 2010s. Digital transformation.
The internet changes everything. Identity theft, cyber fraud, ransomware, financial manipulation across borders. Crime no longer requires physical proximity. It requires access. law enforcement increasingly cooperates internationally through organizations such as Interpol. Digital forensics becomes standard. Metadata becomes evidence. Jurisdiction becomes complicated. Crime is identified through data, massive volumes of data. Oversight becomes technological and increasingly global. The dawn of the new millennium unleashed a paradigm shift in criminal activity. The Internet, once a niche network for academics and researchers, evolved into a global platform for commerce, communication, and inevitably, crime. The very features that made the digital revolution revolutionary, its speed, reach, and anonymity, also created unprecedented opportunities for illicit enterprise. Crimes that once required physical presence now need only a keyboard and an internet connection. Identity theft surged as personal information became a commodity to be bought and sold in digital marketplaces. Cyber fraud schemes evolved from simple email scams to sophisticated phishing operations that perfectly mimicked legitimate financial institutions. Ransomware emerged as a particularly insidious threat, allowing criminals to encrypt entire business systems and demand payment for their release. The scale of this transformation was staggering. According to the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center known as IC3, in 2024 alone, over 859,000 cybercrime complaints were reported, with total losses exceeding $16 billion. This represented not just an increase in criminal activity, but a fundamental change in how crime was conceptualized, executed, and investigated. As crime evolved, so did the methods needed to investigate it. The 2000s and 2010s witnessed the emergence and maturation of digital forensics as a critical component of law enforcement. The discipline had its roots in the 1980s and 1990s, when the growth in computer crime caused law enforcement agencies to begin establishing specialized groups to handle the technical aspects of investigations. In 1984, the FBI launched a computer analysis and response team, marking the beginning of formalized digital investigation capabilities. The year 2000 represented a watershed moment with the opening of the first FBI Regional Computer Forensic Laboratory, which offered a specialized facility for the analysis of digital evidence. This was followed in 2002 by the Scientific Working Group on Digital Evidence, which released the first detailed guide, entitled Best Practices for Computer Forensics, Establishing Standards for Forensic Practices. These developments professionalized the field and provided law enforcement agencies with the protocols needed to ensure digital evidence would be admissible in court. The innovations of cloud computing, mobile devices, and the Internet of Things, or IoT, in the 2010s drove the use of the more general term digital forensics to cover all types of digital evidence, reflecting the wider scope of the discipline. Where once investigators had focused primarily on examining standalone computers to recover deleted or destroyed files from disks, they now had to navigate a complex ecosystem of interconnected devices and platforms. While the digital revolution was reshaping crime itself, another transformation was underway, one driven not by technology but by tragedy. The terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001, fundamentally altered how governments viewed crime, security, and oversight. 19 hijackers, operating across borders and within the United States, exposed critical gaps in intelligence sharing, border security, and interagency coordination. In response, the United States undertook the largest reorganization of its federal government since World War II. In 2002, the Department of Homeland Security was established, consolidating 22 separate federal agencies into a single entity focused on protecting the nation from both external and internal threats. This was more than bureaucratic restructuring. It marked a shift in philosophy. Crime control and national security, once largely separate domains, became deeply intertwined. Agencies responsible for immigration, border protection, transportation security, emergency management, and intelligence analysis were brought together under a unified mission. Organizations such as Customs and Border Protection, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, the Transportation Security Administration, and the Secret Service were integrated into this new framework. The emphasis moved toward prevention rather than reaction. Information sharing became central. Intelligence fusion centers were created to connect federal, state, and local agencies. Data, not just evidence, became a frontline tool in identifying threats before they materialized. This shift had profound implications for law enforcement in the digital age. Surveillance capabilities expanded. Data collection increased. The boundaries between criminal investigation and intelligence gathering became less distinct. Technologies used to combat cybercrime, such as metadata analysis, network monitoring, and behavioral pattern recognition, were increasingly applied to national security efforts. At the same time, this transformation introduced new tensions. Balancing security with civil liberties became an ongoing challenge. Questions about privacy, government oversight, and the appropriate limits of surveillance moved to the forefront of public discourse. The creation of the Department of Homeland Security did not replace traditional law enforcement. Instead, it layered a new dimension onto it, one where crime, terrorism, and digital threats were no longer treated as separate problems, but as interconnected risks within a complex global system. In many ways, this marked the beginning of the modern era of integrated security, where the fight against crime extended beyond streets and borders into networks, data streams, and the unseen infrastructure of the digital world. This new security framework would soon collide with another transformation already underway: the rapid digitization of crime itself. Perhaps the most significant development in digital investigation was the recognition that metadata, the data about data, often proved more valuable than the content itself. While encrypted communications might shield the substance of criminal conversations, the metadata revealing who communicated with whom, when, and from where could provide the crucial connections needed to build a case. This metadata revolution transformed how investigators approach digital evidence, where once they had focused primarily on recovering deleted files or uncovering illicit content, they now increasingly analyze patterns of communication, location data, and transaction records. These digital footprints could reveal networks of associates, establish timelines of criminal activity, and provide the circumstantial evidence needed to secure convictions. The challenge was not a lack of data, but its overwhelming abundance. A single digital device could contain millions of pieces of potentially relevant information. Cloud services could store petabytes of data spread across multiple jurisdictions. Sorting through this massive volume of information required new tools, new techniques, and new expertise. The borderless nature of cybercrime created unprecedented jurisdictional challenges. A criminal operating from one country could victimize individuals in dozens of others, with evidence stored on servers in yet more jurisdictions. This geographical dispersion complicated investigations and often left law enforcement agencies struggling to determine which laws applied and which authorities had jurisdiction. In response, international cooperation became increasingly essential. Organizations like Interpol developed frameworks for sharing digital evidence and coordinating investigations across borders. The Council of Europe's Budapest Convention on Cybercrime, which came into force in 2004, aimed to reconcile national computer crime laws, investigative techniques, and international cooperation. This European-led international treaty established common standards and procedures for investigating cybercrime, facilitating cross-border cooperation. Despite these efforts, significant challenges remained. Differences in laws, procedures, and priorities could impede cooperation. The time-sensitive nature of digital evidence, when a delay of hours could mean the loss of crucial data, added urgency to these challenges. And the sheer volume of cross-border cybercrime often overwhelmed existing mechanisms for international cooperation. The 2000s and 2010s witnessed a continuous technological arms race between cybercriminals and digital investigators. As law enforcement developed new tools and techniques for identifying and prosecuting digital crimes, criminals adapted their methods to evade detection. Encryption became increasingly sophisticated, making it more difficult for investigators to access crucial evidence. Alternative banking platforms and virtual currencies created new avenues for financial crimes that fell outside traditional regulatory frameworks. The Internet of Things exponentially increased the attack surface available to criminals, creating new vulnerabilities and new types of digital evidence. In response, digital investigators had to continually adapt their methods. They developed new tools for analyzing encrypted data, tracing cryptocurrency transactions, and extracting evidence from IoT devices. They incorporated techniques from data science, artificial intelligence, and machine learning to identify patterns in massive datasets. This interdisciplinary approach became essential as the complexity and volume of digital evidence continued to grow. The increasing importance of digital evidence in criminal proceedings created a need for standardized protocols and procedures. The Scientific Working Group on Digital Evidence produced a 2002 paper entitled Best Practices for Computer Forensics, followed in 2005 by the publication of an ISO standard entitled ISO 17025, General Requirements for the Competence Testing and Calibration Laboratories. These standards helped ensure that digital evidence would be collected, preserved, and analyzed in ways that maintained its integrity and admissibility in court. The complexity of digital forensic tasks and the required compliance with law and court's regulations led to the establishment of strict protocols and procedures to be followed. These protocols addressed every stage of the digital investigation process, from the initial identification and collection of evidence to its preservation, analysis, and presentation in court. International organizations also developed guidance for handling digital evidence. The Electronic Evidence Guide by the Council of Europe offered a framework for law enforcement and judicial authorities in countries seeking to set up or enhance their own guidelines for the identification and handling of electronic evidence. Interpol similarly developed standards and shared knowledge about digital forensics practices across borders. Perhaps the defining characteristic of digital investigation in the 2000s and 2010s was the sheer volume of data that investigators had to process. A single cybercrime investigation could involve terabytes of information from multiple sources, including computers, mobile devices, cloud services, and network logs. This data deluge created significant challenges. Traditional manual methods of evidence review were inadequate for the scale of digital investigations. The time required to process massive data sets could delay investigations beyond the point where evidence remained actionable. The complexity of modern systems made it increasingly difficult to identify the most relevant evidence among the noise. In response, investigators turned to technological solutions. They developed specialized software tools designed to process, index, and search large volumes of digital evidence. They incorporated techniques from data science and artificial intelligence to identify patterns and connections that might escape human reviewers. They increasingly relied on automated systems to flag potentially relevant information for human review, allowing investigators to focus their attention on the most promising leads. The borderless nature of cybercrime necessitated a globalization of oversight mechanisms. National laws and regulations proved insufficient for addressing crimes that transcended geographical boundaries. International cooperation became not just beneficial but essential for effective digital law enforcement. This globalization took multiple forms. International organizations like Interpol developed frameworks for sharing information and coordinating investigations. Multinational treaties, like the Budapest Convention on Cybercrime, established common standards and procedures. Informal networks of digital investigators emerged, allowing for the rapid exchange of information and best practices across borders. The banking, financial services, and insurance sectors were expected to grow the fastest as they were targeted with cybercrimes and digital frauds. Mobile banking also led to an increase in fraud incidents through access to customer information and data. These trends reinforce the need for international cooperation and standardized approaches to digital investigation. The technological sophistication of digital investigation created new demands for the skills and expertise of investigators. Where once law enforcement had primarily recruited from traditional policing backgrounds, it now increasingly needed individuals with specialized technical knowledge. People with new skill sets in artificial intelligence and data science began joining the field, and digital investigation techniques and methods were being applied to crime analysis and intelligence. Digital forensic intelligence became a priority in order to understand interjurisdictional criminal activity. This evolution created both opportunities and challenges. On one hand, it brought new perspectives and capabilities to law enforcement. On the other, it created competition for talent with the private sector, where technical skills often commanded higher salaries. It also raised questions about how to balance technical expertise with traditional investigative skills and knowledge of legal and procedural requirements. The digital transformation of the 2000s and 2010s left a complex legacy. It provided law enforcement with powerful new tools for identifying and prosecuting criminal activity. It created new opportunities for international cooperation and information sharing. It professionalized the field of digital investigation and established standards for handling digital evidence. At the same time, it created new vulnerabilities. The increasing sophistication of cybercrime meant that law enforcement was often in a reactive position, struggling to keep pace with criminal innovation. The borderless nature of digital crime created jurisdictional challenges that existing legal frameworks struggled to address. The massive volume of digital evidence overwhelmed existing investigative resources and capabilities. These tensions would continue to shape digital investigation in subsequent decades. The technological arms race between cybercriminals and digital investigators would accelerate. The tension between privacy and security would intensify. And the need for international cooperation would become even more pressing as cybercrime continued to evolve and expand. The 2000s and 2010s witnessed a fundamental transformation in the nature of crime and its investigation. Where once criminal activity had required physical proximity, being present at the scene of the crime, it now increasingly required only digital access, a keyboard, an internet connection, and the knowledge to exploit vulnerabilities. This transformation had profound implications for law enforcement. Where once investigators had focused primarily on physical evidence and eyewitness testimony, they now increasingly depended on digital evidence, data analysis, and international cooperation. The crime scene was no longer just a physical location, but a digital environment that could span multiple jurisdictions and continents. The era established patterns that would continue to shape digital investigation in subsequent decades. The importance of digital evidence, the need for international cooperation, and the technological arms race between cybercriminals and investigators would all be further developed in the years to come. The 2000s and 2010s marked a turning point in the relationship between crime and oversight, a shift from physical investigation to digital analysis, from local enforcement to global cooperation. This transformation would face new challenges in subsequent decades as technology continued to evolve, and cybercrime became even more sophisticated. The journey from bootleggers to bureaucracy was entering a new phase, with artificial intelligence and automation creating both new opportunities for criminal enterprise and new tools for law enforcement.
Part 7. The 2020s. Systems as Targets. In 2026, many prominent crimes involve grant fraud, benefits abuse, procurement manipulation, shell entities, contract steering, and public corruption investigations. These crimes are often nonviolent. They may never involve confrontation. They may involve forms, applications, or digital submissions. They exploit complexity. They exploit speed. They exploit gaps between oversight mechanisms. Modern detection often relies on internal audits, inspectors general financial compliance units, pattern detection software, and cross-agency data comparison. Crime is identified when systems examine themselves. This is an evolutionary stage. Oversight has become reflexive. As we stand in 2026, the nature of prominent crime has shifted once again. While street crime and cyber fraud continue, a significant portion of high-impact criminal activity has evolved to target the very systems designed to distribute resources and administer public programs. These crimes are often nonviolent, leaving no physical crime scene, no eyewitnesses, and no immediate evidence of wrongdoing. Instead, these crimes involve the manipulation of forms, applications, and digital submissions. They exploit the complexity of modern governance, the speed of digital transactions, and the gaps between oversight mechanisms. Where the criminal of the 1920s used a gun and the criminal of the 1990s used a keyboard, The criminal of 2026 uses algorithmic manipulation and systemic exploitation. The COVID-19 pandemic dramatically accelerated this trend. The rapid deployment of massive relief programs like the Paycheck Protection Program and unemployment insurance created unprecedented opportunities for fraud. The Department of Justice has charged over 3,500 defendants with federal crimes related to pandemic relief fraud, involving over $2 billion in alleged fraudulent loans. This represented not just a series of individual crimes, but a systemic exploitation of emergency programs designed for rapid distribution of funds. Grant fraud has become increasingly sophisticated in the digital age. Criminals submit falsified applications for government grants, often using stolen identities or shell corporations to appear legitimate. They may fabricate project proposals, misrepresent qualifications, or submit false documentation to secure funding intended for legitimate purposes. Similarly, benefits abuse has evolved from simple misrepresentation to complex schemes involving identity theft and coordinated applications across multiple jurisdictions. Digital submission systems, while improving efficiency, have also created new vulnerabilities that can be exploited at scale. The scale of these crimes can be enormous. A single fraudulent scheme can involve hundreds of applications across multiple programs, resulting in millions of dollars in losses before detection. The decentralized nature of many benefit programs, with funding and administration spread across multiple agencies and jurisdictions, creates opportunities for criminals to exploit inconsistencies in verification processes. Public procurement represents another vulnerable system. Criminals with inside knowledge or influence can manipulate the bidding process to steer contracts toward preferred vendors. This might involve leaking bid information to competitors, setting unnecessary specifications that favor particular suppliers, or manipulating evaluation criteria. These schemes often involve sophisticated networks of relationships between public officials, vendors, and intermediaries. They may exploit legitimate business relationships to create the appearance of propriety while ensuring predetermined outcomes. The complexity of modern procurement processes, with their multiple stages and requirements, can provide cover for manipulation that is difficult to detect without specialized knowledge. The financial stakes can be substantial. Major public infrastructure projects involve millions or even billions of dollars, making even small percentage manipulations extremely profitable. The long-term nature of these projects also creates ongoing opportunities for fraud throughout the project lifecycle, from initial bidding to final payment. The use of shell entities, corporations with no real operations or assets, has become a standard tool for sophisticated financial crime. These entities can be used to obscure ownership, create the appearance of legitimate business activity, and layer transactions to confuse investigators. The digital revolution has made it easier than ever to establish and manage these entities. Online incorporation services, virtual offices, and digital banking services allow criminals to create complex corporate structures without ever physically visiting the jurisdictions where these entities are registered. The challenge for investigators is compounded by the international nature of many shell entity schemes. A single fraudulent operation might involve corporations registered in multiple jurisdictions, with bank accounts in still others, creating a complex web that requires significant resources and international cooperation to unravel. The response to these systemic crimes has been the development of equally systemic detection methods. Where once investigation had relied on human observation and physical evidence, it now increasingly depends on automated systems that can analyze massive data sets to identify patterns indicative of fraud. Internal audit functions have evolved from periodic manual reviews to continuous automated monitoring. Inspectors general, established in major federal agencies to provide independent oversight, have increasingly sophisticated data analytics capabilities. Financial compliance units use artificial intelligence and machine learning to identify anomalies in transaction patterns. Perhaps most significantly, cross-agency data comparison has become a powerful tool for identifying fraud. By comparing information across multiple systems, investigators can identify inconsistencies that might indicate fraudulent activity. An individual claiming unemployment benefits in one state while working in another, or a corporation receiving multiple disaster loans for the same property, can be identified through data matching that would be impossible through manual processes. The establishment and empowerment of inspectors general, or IGs, represents one of the most important developments in modern oversight. Created in major federal agencies to provide independent audit and investigation functions, IGs have increasingly sophisticated capabilities for detecting and investigating systemic fraud. The Council of the Inspectors General on Integrity and Efficiency was established to improve coordination and promote integrity among IGs across the federal government. This organization develops standards, shares best practices, and facilitates collaboration on investigations that span multiple agencies. The work of IGs has become increasingly data-driven. Where once audits had relied primarily on sampling and manual review, they now increasingly use continuous monitoring and data analytics to identify anomalies. This approach allows for more comprehensive coverage and more timely identification of potential issues. The massive volume of digital data created by modern governance has necessitated the development of sophisticated pattern detection software. These systems use artificial intelligence and machine learning to identify patterns that might indicate fraudulent activity. These systems can analyze millions of transactions in minutes, identifying anomalies that would escape human notice. They can learn from past fraud cases to recognize new patterns as they emerge. They can adapt to changing criminal techniques, providing a dynamic defense against evolving threats. The effectiveness of these systems depends on the quality of the data they analyze and the sophistication of the algorithms they employ. They require significant investment in technology and expertise, but they offer the potential to identify fraud at a scale and speed that would be impossible through manual methods. Perhaps the most powerful development in modern fraud detection is the ability to compare data across multiple agencies and systems. This approach can identify inconsistencies in relationships that would be invisible when examining any single system in isolation. The Department of Treasury's Do Not Pay initiative represents a comprehensive approach to this challenge. The DNP Center provides a single point of contact for federal agencies to access data and tools that can help prevent improper payments before they occur. This includes access to death records, prison records, and debarment lists that can help identify ineligible recipients. The effectiveness of cross-agency data comparison depends on both technical capabilities and legal frameworks. Agencies must have the technical infrastructure to share and compare data, and they must navigate privacy and confidentiality requirements that might restrict information sharing. The combination of these developments has created what might be called a reflexive oversight paradigm, systems that examine themselves for signs of fraud or abuse. This represents an evolutionary stage in the relationship between crime and oversight. Where once oversight had been primarily reactive, responding to crimes after they occurred, it increasingly becomes proactive, identifying potential fraud before it results in significant losses. Where once oversight had depended primarily on human observation, it increasingly depends on automated analysis. Where once oversight had been the domain of specialized investigators, it increasingly becomes embedded in the systems themselves. This reflexive oversight offers significant advantages in speed, scale, and consistency. It can identify patterns that might escape human notice. It can operate continuously rather than periodically. It can apply consistent standards across massive datasets. The evolution toward reflexive oversight is not without challenges. The collection and analysis of massive amounts of data raises significant privacy concerns. The algorithms used to identify fraudulent patterns can reflect or amplify existing biases. The complexity of these systems can make them difficult to understand or challenge. The privacy implications are particularly significant. Systems designed to detect fraud necessarily collect and analyze vast amounts of personal information. Balancing the need for effective oversight with respect for privacy rights represents an ongoing challenge. Algorithmic bias represents another concern. If historical data reflects patterns of discrimination or unequal treatment, algorithms trained on this data may perpetuate or even amplify these patterns. Ensuring fairness in automated oversight systems requires careful attention to both the data used and the algorithms employed. As oversight systems become more sophisticated, so do the criminal techniques designed to evade them. The future of systemic crime will likely involve increasingly sophisticated attempts to manipulate or deceive oversight systems themselves. Artificial intelligence could be used to generate more convincing fraudulent applications or to identify vulnerabilities in oversight systems. The increasing sophistication of shell entity structures could make ownership even more difficult to trace. The growth of decentralized financial systems could create new opportunities for fraud that fall outside traditional regulatory frameworks. The response to these evolving threats will require continued innovation in oversight methods. It will require greater investment in technology and expertise. It will require ongoing attention to the privacy and fairness implications of automated oversight. And it will require international cooperation to address crimes that transcend national boundaries. The transformation of crime and oversight in the 2020s represents the culmination of a century-long evolution. Where once crime had been identified through physical evidence and eyewitness testimony, it now increasingly depends on the analysis of massive datasets and the identification of patterns indicative of fraud. This transformation has profound implications for the relationship between citizens and government. Where once oversight had been primarily the domain of specialized investigators, it increasingly becomes embedded in the systems that administer public programs. Where once crime had been visible and tangible, it now often occurs in the abstract realm of digital transactions and algorithmic manipulations. The era establishes patterns that will likely shape oversight in subsequent decades. The importance of data analysis, the need for cross-agency cooperation, and the tension between efficiency and security will all continue to influence the evolution of crime and its detection. The 2020s mark a turning point in the relationship between crime and oversight, a shift from reactive investigation to systemic analysis, from human observation to automated monitoring. This transformation represents the culmination of a century-long evolution from bootleggers to bureaucracy. As we look toward the future, the question becomes not how systems can be overseen, but how systems can be designed to oversee themselves, creating a reflexive approach to fraud detection that balances effectiveness with fairness, efficiency with privacy, and innovation with accountability.
my god. I think I've had a bit too much history. I think I've been thrown into an alternate reality. Sort of a parallel universe kind of thing. No, I think it's just that I'm identifying so much with the people of the past. Excellent. This is kinda nice, knowing how things really work and using history to make better decisions for the future. I'm kind of digging this. Wow. I love history. Oh my goodness. Okay now, that's much better. Let's keep on listening.
Wherever you get your podcast groove on, you can get all the history you can eat anytime with Preservation Oaks. Join other listeners at preservationoaks.podbean.com and let us know what you think by sending email to preservationoaks@gmail.com.
Here's a list of the essentials you'll need to renovate your bathroom whenever you get the time. Safety mask, gloves, goggles, caulking gun, propane torch, silicone sealant, tape measure, putty knives, stud finder, tiles, pry bar, power drill, bucket, chisel, adjustable wrench, screwdrivers, hacksaw, utility knife, several strong cups of coffee, chalk line, paint, brushes, flooring, tub enclosure, plumbing essentials, and an extension cord. And here's a list of the essentials you'll need to volunteer at your local genealogical or historical society instead. A smile. A handshake. An ability to meet and greet people and have fun, a knowledge of local history, research skills. Enjoy volunteering at your local genealogical or historical society today. That's very helpful of you, and benefits your community.
I was made of tough rawhide by a master. He put a lot of special tooling on my horn, pommel, skirts, cantle, fenders, jockeys, strings, and cinch. My conchos were made of pure silver. I was presented to the first prize winner. That's where I met Matt. From then on, Matt used me on holidays, special trail rides, for parades, and other events. He would oil me, and wipe me down every time he used me. He was so proud of me, and I was happy to be a part of his tack. Years went by, and Matt used me less and less. Finally, I was used at his funeral with his favorite horse Annie. We looked great together. Then, I sat in the tack room for years. Finally, the ranch was sold, and I was discovered under a blanket of dust by the new owner. She marveled at me, and I can remember that day so well. She oiled me again and donated me to the local historical society museum. They replaced the brittle latigos and strings, and even paid to retool them to match. I looked good again. Now, I'm on display for the community to see every day, and they marvel at the way I look and how I'm made. I feel so proud that I can help others understand the past, which I guess I'm now a part of.
Rather than throwing it out, please donate historical records and objects to your local historical society today.
And now, back to Preservation Oaks.
Part 8. The AI Question.
Our discussion now brings us to artificial intelligence. When crime exceeds human-scale review, societies build tools. Fingerprints, wiretaps, databases. Now, algorithms. AI systems today can flag anomalous grant patterns, identify suspicious financial clusters, cross-reference entities across massive datasets, detect irregularities in procurement flows. But we must say clearly, AI does not determine guilt. AI highlights irregularities. Human investigators decide. Historically, every oversight tool has required oversight of itself. AI will be no different. Whether laws mandate AI watchdog systems broadly remains uncertain. What is certain is this: as systems grow more complex, tools of analysis grow more advanced, technology evolves, responsibility remains human. Throughout our century-long journey, a pattern has emerged. As crime scales beyond the capacity of human observation, societies develop technological tools to restore oversight. In the 1930s, fingerprint databases allowed investigators to identify suspects across state lines. In the 1960s, wiretaps revealed conspiracies hidden behind closed doors. In the 1990s, financial databases traced money through complex corporate structures. Each tool expanded the scope of what could be monitored, but each also eventually reached its limits. The human eye could only compare so many fingerprints. The human ear could only listen to so many conversations. The human mind could only follow so many financial transactions. Today, we face a similar threshold. The volume, velocity, and variety of digital data have exceeded human-scale review. A single major federal agency processes millions of transactions daily. A single grant program receives thousands of applications. A single procurement system oversees billions of dollars in contracts. The complexity and scale of these systems have created a blind spot where fraud can flourish undetected. Artificial intelligence represents the latest tool developed to address this challenge. Unlike previous technologies that primarily enhanced human capabilities, AI systems can operate at machine scale, analyzing massive datasets, identifying subtle patterns, and flagging anomalies that might escape human notice. The applications of AI in fraud detection are already widespread and growing. The Department of Treasury's Do Not Pay initiative uses AI-powered systems to screen payment requests against multiple databases before funds are disbursed. The Internal Revenue Service employs machine learning algorithms to identify potentially fraudulent tax returns. The Small Business Administration uses AI to flag high-risk loan applications. These systems can flag anomalous grant patterns that might indicate falsified applications or duplicate funding. They can identify suspicious financial clusters that might represent shell entity networks or money laundering schemes. They can cross-reference entities across massive datasets to reveal hidden connections or conflicts of interest. They can detect irregularities in procurement flows that might indicate contract steering or bid manipulation. The recognition of AI's potential for government oversight has led to significant institutional investment. The National Artificial Intelligence Initiative Act of 2020 established a coordinated federal strategy for AI research, development, and application. This initiative has included specific focus on applications for fraud detection and government efficiency. The Department of Justice has developed AI tools for identifying patterns in financial crimes, cyber fraud, and public corruption. The Department of Health and Human Services uses AI systems to detect Medicare and Medicaid fraud. The Department of Defense employs AI to identify procurement fraud and wasteful spending. These efforts represent a coordinated approach to leveraging AI for oversight across the federal government. They acknowledge that the scale and complexity of modern government operations require analytical tools that can operate at machine speed and scale. As AI systems become more integral to oversight operations, a new challenge emerges: how to oversee the overseers. The complexity of many AI systems, particularly those using deep learning techniques, can make their decision-making processes opaque, even to their developers. This black box problem has led to the development of algorithmic audit techniques, methods for examining AI systems to ensure they are operating as intended and not introducing new forms of bias or error. The National Institute of Standards and Technology has developed an artificial intelligence risk management framework that provides guidance on managing AI risks, including those related to bias, reliability, and security. The Government Accountability Office has also called for greater oversight of federal AI systems, recommending that agencies establish clear frameworks for testing, evaluating, and monitoring AI applications. These efforts recognize that AI, like any oversight tool, requires oversight of itself. Despite the power and potential of AI systems, it is crucial to emphasize that AI does not determine guilt. AI systems highlight irregularities, identify patterns, and flag potential issues, but human investigators make the final determination. This distinction is not merely semantic, but fundamental to due process and accountability. The Department of Justice has been clear on this point in its guidance on the use of AI in law enforcement. AI systems can assist in identifying leads, prioritizing investigations, and analyzing evidence, but they cannot replace human judgment. The decision to investigate, the determination of probable cause, and the assessment of guilt remain exclusively human functions. This distinction protects against several risks. It prevents the automation of judgment, preserving human accountability for consequential decisions. It allows for the consideration of context and nuance that might escape algorithmic analysis. It ensures that due process protections apply to the determination of guilt, not just the collection of evidence. The regulatory framework for AI oversight remains in development. While some sector-specific regulations exist, particularly in areas like consumer protection and financial services, comprehensive federal legislation governing AI use in government oversight has not yet been enacted. Several bills have been introduced in Congress to address this gap. The Algorithmic Accountability Act would require companies to assess the impacts of their AI systems. The AI in Government Act would establish guidelines for federal agency use of AI. The National AI Initiative Act includes provisions for AI standards and evaluation. At the state level, legislation like the Colorado AI Act has begun to establish frameworks for algorithmic accountability. These emerging regulations reflect growing recognition that AI systems require specific oversight mechanisms tailored to their unique characteristics and risks. One of the most significant challenges in applying AI to fraud detection is the risk of perpetuating or amplifying existing biases. AI systems learn from historical data, and if that data reflects patterns of discrimination or unequal treatment, the algorithms may perpetuate these patterns. The Treasury Department has acknowledged this challenge in its implementation of AI systems for fraud detection. They have emphasized the importance of testing for disparate impacts and ensuring that AI systems do not unfairly target particular communities or demographic groups. Addressing this challenge requires careful attention to both the data used to train AI systems and the algorithms themselves. It requires ongoing monitoring for biased outcomes and mechanisms for addressing them when they occur. It requires transparency about how AI systems make decisions and the factors they consider. Looking toward the future, we can expect AI to become increasingly integrated into oversight systems. The evolution from human observation to technological assistance to automated analysis represents a continuum that will likely continue with the development of more sophisticated AI capabilities. Future systems might incorporate real-time monitoring capabilities that identify potential fraud as it occurs. They might use predictive analytics to identify vulnerabilities before they are exploited. They might employ natural language processing to analyze unstructured data like emails and documents for evidence of collusion or corruption. These developments will create what might be called truly reflexive oversight systems. Systems that not only examine themselves, but continuously adapt and improve based on new information and techniques. This represents the next evolutionary stage in the century-long journey from bootleggers to bureaucracy. As we conclude this examination of AI's role in oversight, one principle remains clear: technology evolves, but responsibility remains human. The sophistication of our tools may change, but the accountability for their use remains with the humans who deploy them. This principle has several implications. It means that oversight of AI systems must be a priority, with clear frameworks for testing, evaluation, and monitoring. It means that human judgment must remain central to consequential decisions, particularly those affecting individual rights and liberties. It means that the development and deployment of AI systems must be guided by ethical principles and legal requirements. The journey from bootleggers to bureaucracy has been characterized by an ongoing tension between the scale of criminal activity and the capacity of oversight systems. As we stand in 2026, AI represents the latest tool developed to address this tension. But it is not the final word. The future will undoubtedly bring new challenges and new tools, but the fundamental principle of human responsibility will endure.
Part 9. International Cooperation.
In 1926, most crime was local. In 2026, money flows globally. Digital communication ignores borders. Law enforcement cooperation across nations has become routine. Extradition treaties, financial intelligence sharing, joint task forces. Oversight is now multinational. Crime follows complexity. Enforcement follows cooperation. In 1926, a criminal's world was largely defined by geography. A bootlegger's operation was constrained by the physical limits of how far his trucks could travel and how many local officials he could corrupt. A bank robber's escape was limited by how quickly he could cross state lines in a V8 automobile. Crime, for the most part, was a local affair, requiring physical presence and creating tangible evidence within specific jurisdictions. Contrast this with 2026, where a criminal can initiate a fraudulent transaction from a laptop in one country, route the proceeds through a series of shell corporations in others, and access the funds from anywhere in the world. Digital communication has rendered physical borders almost meaningless for criminal enterprise. Money flows at the speed of light through a global financial network, and digital evidence can be stored on servers in multiple jurisdictions simultaneously. This transformation has fundamentally reshaped the landscape of crime and its investigation. Where once oversight had been primarily the domain of local or national authorities, it now increasingly requires international cooperation. The journey from bootleggers to bureaucracy has culminated in a system where oversight itself has become multinational. The foundation of modern international law enforcement cooperation is a complex web of treaties and agreements. The most prominent of these is Interpol, founded in 1923, which serves as a global network connecting 195 member countries, facilitating police cooperation and information sharing across borders. Extradition treaties represent another crucial element of this framework. These agreements, which can be bilateral or multilateral, establish the legal mechanisms by which one country can request the surrender of a fugitive from another. The United States maintains extradition treaties with over 100 countries, though the conditions and limitations vary significantly depending on the specific treaty and the legal systems involved. The European Union has developed particularly sophisticated mechanisms for cross-border law enforcement cooperation within its member states. Agencies like Europol, established in 1998, coordinate investigations and intelligence sharing between member states, while the European Arrest Warrant System, implemented in 2004, streamlined the extradition process within the EU. If there is one area where international cooperation has become most essential, it is in following the money. The globalization of finance has created opportunities for sophisticated money laundering schemes that exploit differences in national regulations and enforcement priorities. In response, the international community has established networks for financial intelligence sharing. The Egmont Group of Financial Intelligence Units, founded in 1995, connects 174 financial intelligence units worldwide, providing a secure platform for the exchange of financial information to combat money laundering, terrorist financing, and other financial crimes. The Financial Action Task Force, established by the G7 in 1989, has developed international standards for anti-money laundering and counter-terrorist financing measures. The Financial Action Task Force's 40 recommendations provide a comprehensive framework that countries are encouraged to implement, and the organization monitors compliance through a peer review process. These mechanisms have transformed financial investigation from a primarily national activity to a global enterprise. Where once investigators had struggled to trace money across borders, they now can access international networks of financial information and coordinate multi-jurisdictional investigations. Perhaps the most tangible expression of international cooperation is the Joint Task Force. These collaborative efforts bring together law enforcement agencies from multiple countries to investigate specific criminal activities that transcend national boundaries. The U.S. Department of Justice participates in numerous joint task forces with international partners. These might focus on specific types of crime, such as cybercrime, drug trafficking, or organized crime, or on specific criminal organizations that operate across borders. The International Cybercrime Coordination Cell, hosted by the National Cyber Investigative Joint Task Force, represents a particularly sophisticated example of this approach. This initiative brings together international partners to coordinate cybercrime investigations and share threat intelligence. These joint task forces represent a practical evolution in law enforcement methodology. Where once investigations had been conducted primarily by individual agencies within their jurisdictions, they now increasingly involve coordinated efforts across multiple agencies and multiple countries. One of the most significant challenges in international law enforcement cooperation is the diversity of legal systems. What constitutes a crime in one country may not be illegal in another. Procedures for collecting evidence may differ significantly. Privacy protections and due process rights may vary substantially. The Council of Europe's Convention on Cybercrime, opened for signature in 2001, represents an attempt to address these challenges. The treaty, often referred to as the Budapest Convention, aims to harmonize national laws, improve investigative techniques, and increase cooperation among signatories. Similarly, the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime works to develop international conventions and protocols that establish common standards for combating specific types of crime, such as transnational organized crime, corruption, and terrorism. These efforts at legal harmonization facilitate cooperation by creating common frameworks and procedures. They reduce the friction that can arise when different legal systems intersect, making it easier for agencies to work together effectively. Despite the sophisticated framework of international cooperation, significant practical challenges remain. Differences in language, culture, and law enforcement procedures can complicate collaborative efforts. Resource disparities between agencies can create imbalances in partnerships. Political considerations can sometimes override law enforcement priorities. The process of obtaining evidence from another country can be particularly challenging. Mutual legal assistance treaties establish formal procedures for these requests, but the process can be time-consuming and complex. Different standards for evidence collection and admissibility can create additional hurdles. These challenges highlight that international cooperation is not merely a matter of signing treaties, but of building relationships, establishing trust, and developing practical mechanisms for working together effectively. The human element of cooperation, personal relationships between investigators, shared professional values, and mutual respect remains essential despite the technological and legal frameworks. Despite these challenges, there are numerous examples of successful international cooperation. The dismantling of sophisticated cybercrime networks, the disruption of international drug trafficking operations, and the recovery of assets laundered across multiple jurisdictions all demonstrate the effectiveness of collaborative approaches. The takedown of the Silk Road dark web marketplace in 2013 represented a particularly notable success. This operation involved coordination between multiple U.S. agencies and international partners, demonstrating how collaborative efforts can address crimes that operate entirely in the digital realm. Similarly, the identification and disruption of money laundering networks associated with global corruption scandals has often depended on international cooperation. These cases have required coordination between financial intelligence units, law enforcement agencies, and prosecutors across multiple jurisdictions. These successes illustrate the principle that enforcement follows cooperation. Where once law enforcement had been constrained by national boundaries, it can now operate across borders through collaborative mechanisms. Looking toward the future, we can expect international law enforcement cooperation to become even more integrated and sophisticated. The increasing globalization of crime will necessitate continued development of cooperative mechanisms. Emerging technologies will likely play a significant role in this evolution. Secure platforms for sharing sensitive information, AI tools for analyzing transnational datasets, and blockchain technologies for tracking cross-border transactions all have the potential to enhance international cooperation. The institutional framework will also continue to develop. New treaties and agreements will address emerging types of crime. Existing organizations like Interpol and Europol will expand their capabilities and membership. New forms of collaborative investigation will be developed to address specific challenges. As we conclude this examination of international cooperation, one principle remains clear. The tension between national sovereignty and international cooperation must be continuously balanced. Countries must protect their legal systems and national interests while participating in collaborative efforts to combat transnational crime. This balance is not static but requires ongoing adjustment as crime evolves and new challenges emerge. The appropriate level of cooperation may vary depending on the type of crime, the countries involved, and the specific circumstances of each case. The journey from the local crime of 1926 to the global crime of 2026 has been characterized by an increasing recognition that effective oversight requires cooperation across borders. This recognition has driven the development of a sophisticated framework of treaties, agreements, and collaborative mechanisms that enable law enforcement to address crimes that transcend national boundaries. The evolution of international cooperation brings our century-long journey to its global conclusion. Where once oversight had been primarily local or national, it has now become multinational. Where once crime had been constrained by geography, it now operates in a borderless digital environment. But through all these changes, one principle remains constant. As crime becomes more complex and transnational, oversight must become more cooperative and coordinated. The journey from bootleggers to bureaucracy has culminated in a system where enforcement follows cooperation, and where the protection of society depends on the ability of nations to work together effectively against common threats.
Part 10. Final Reflection.
Welcome to the final segment. When I look at the century-long arc we've just walked through, I don't just see heroes and villains. I see people creating systems adapting to human behavior on both sides of the equation. And I see how fragile the balance between liberty and order truly is. I see how crucial law enforcement and our justice system is to our civilizations across the world. I see how crucial educating our young people is to work and live in this world. It is absolutely critical. Looking back over a century of adaptation, both by criminals and by society, reveals some uncomfortable but essential truths about who we are and where we might be heading. We have learned that our evolution is not a straight line toward a crime-free utopia. It is an arms race. Every tool we create to enforce order is met with a clever adaptation from those seeking to subvert it. And so we've evolved from observing people to analyzing systems. We've learned that distance and scale can be used to create anonymity. We've learned that oversight is a constant trade-off. Every expansion of surveillance, whether it's the wiretap of the 1960s or the algorithmic monitoring of today, comes with a cost to privacy and often to trust. Our systems of finance, governance, and technology have grown so complex that no single person fully understands them anymore. Not the people running them, not the people overseeing them. And increasingly, oversight itself depends on systems like artificial intelligence to interpret patterns inside systems that humans alone can no longer comprehend. That creates a kind of recursive loop, where we rely on complex systems to monitor other complex systems. And that loop is incredibly difficult to manage and even harder to audit. We've seen this play out in real life in cases like those uncovered in the state of Minnesota, where individuals set up what appeared to be legitimate healthcare businesses, submitted proper documentation, filed claims, and received government payments. On paper, everything looked right. The forms were complete, the billing codes aligned, the systems approved the transactions. But in reality, many of these operations had no substance behind them. In some cases, a simple visit, a knock on the door, would have raised immediate questions. So what happened? They didn't just exploit the system. They hid inside it, inside its layers of process, inside its assumptions of legitimacy, inside its sheer scale and complexity. And the auditors? They were there, but they were looking through systems designed to detect patterns, not absence. And sometimes what's missing is the hardest thing to see. Digital crime happens at machine speed. A ransomware attack can encrypt a city's entire infrastructure in minutes. A financial fraud can siphon millions across the globe in seconds. Our legal and cooperative frameworks, built on treaties and human deliberation, move at human pace. We are perpetually behind. The more we rely on technological solutions, the more we may neglect the human element. We can become so focused on building the perfect algorithm that we forget that crime is ultimately a human endeavor, requiring human intuition, empathy, and ethical judgment to combat. The global networks that criminals exploit are also the networks that allow law enforcement to cooperate. The same data that can be used to commit fraud can be analyzed to detect it. The same AI that can be used to create sophisticated deep fakes can be used to spot them. We are not in a corner. We are in a chess match where both sides are using increasingly powerful pieces. The entire history we've just recounted in this episode is proof of our societal adaptability. We don't just build one wall and stop. When criminals compromised the wall, we built a better one. When they went around it, we built a moat. When they tunneled under it, we put sensors in the ground. The corner only becomes permanent if we lose the will to keep adapting in order to protect our citizens and our societies. The evidence suggests that crime is not a fundamental nature of mankind in the way that breathing or sleeping is. Rather, it's a persistent potential that emerges from a combination of human traits and environmental conditions. The 7 deadly sins, these drivers are timeless. Greed, desire for status, power, revenge, desperation. These are not inventions of a modern era. The bootlegger of 1926 wanted money and respect. The cybercriminal of 2026 wants the same things. The methods change, but the underlying human motivations are remarkably consistent. Crime flourishes where opportunity meets motivation. Prohibition created the opportunity for organized crime. The internet created the opportunity for fraud. Complex global financial systems created the opportunity for sophisticated manipulation. We are not inherently criminal, but we are inherently opportunistic. When a system presents a vulnerability, a certain percentage of our population will seek to exploit it for personal gain. The other thing I've learned is that the social contract is fragile. At its core, crime is a breakdown of the social contract. The implicit agreement that we will all follow certain rules for the collective good. History shows that this contract is not self-sustaining. It requires constant maintenance, reinforcement, and adaptation. It requires that we continually educate our children about our societal rules and norms. When people feel the system is unfair, or when they see others profiting from breaking the rules, their willingness to uphold the contract erodes. It is in our nature to have desires. It is in our nature to test boundaries. And it is in our nature to adapt. Crime is what happens when those traits are channeled into breaking the law and ignoring or relaxing the agreed-upon standards of society rather than upholding them. The final enduring lesson from our century-long walk is this: the battle against crime is not a battle to eliminate a fixed aspect of human nature. It is a continuous, civilized, dynamic process of building and maintaining systems of mutual trust, accountability, and respect that are more compelling and more resilient than the temptations that seek to undermine them. Oversight is not a machine or a system or AI. It's a responsibility, and it belongs to people. And that ultimately is our only way out of whatever corner we might paint ourselves into. Every era built tools to fight the crimes of its time. But the lesson of this century is not simply that crime evolves. It is that power evolves to deal with it, and power too must be governed. Each generation builds tools and systems to confront its dangers, so that real people don't get hurt and destroyed. But every tool and every system carry responsibility from people, real people. History also reminds us that machines, systems, AI, and people must evolve, but so must balance and restraint, and again, it's people who define and exercise that restraint via the law. We must never forget this. If we step back and look across the last 100 years, in 1926, crime had faces. In 1956, crime had influence. In 1976, crime had intelligence networks. In 1996, crime had financial architecture. In 2016, crime had international and digital reach. And in 2026, crime has systemic complexity. And in response, in 1926, police patrols became agencies. Agencies became departments. Departments became networks. Networks became international. Oversight became technological. Crime did not disappear. It adapted. And so did we. From bootleggers watched on darkened streets, to spreadsheets examined by auditors, to algorithms scanning millions of transactions in databases, the story of crime is also the story of how societies choose to see, how they choose to detect. Tools change, temptations remain, and accountability must evolve with complexity. But one truth endures: education, civility, honesty, and oversight are not found in a machine. These are a sacred responsibility, and it belongs to people. This has been Preservation Oaks, episode 123. I'm Sean Radcliffe. Thank you for examining this century of crime with us. All right, that's a wrap for this episode. Music used in part 2 is from Cymbalbird and El Gavilon. Hey, this is Sean Radcliffe. See you all next time on Preservation Oaks, and until then, keep on giving and keep on living the good life.
You can visit at www.microstreamradio.com. This broadcast is owned and copyrighted by Microstream Radio. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, reproduced, copied, or used anywhere without the written permission of Microstream Radio. Preservation Oaks starring Sean Radcliffe originates in Salt Lake City, Utah. Be sure to join us for our next episode on your favorite podcast platform. This is Sonia Maxwell speaking. Preservation Oaks has come to you through the worldwide podcast platform Podbean, and our home is preservationoaks.podbean.com. Hopefully you found today's episode useful, informative, and thought-provoking. If so, please like, comment, and subscribe. Remember that being free means being free to be curious, and that historical and genealogical societies and museums allow us to discover the past, be free to explore, where curiosity opens every door. Thanks to everyone for listening. Stay cozy, curious, and keep exploring the incredible stories that shape our world. Remember to cherish and support the preservation of history in your own communities. The content of this program is provided for educational and informational purposes only. Some material included in this program may be copyrighted by third parties. However, under Section 107 of the U.S. Copyright Act, the doctrine of fair use allows the limited use of copyrighted material without requiring permission from the rights holders when used for purposes such as education, criticism, commentary, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. These uses are legally permitted even if they might otherwise constitute infringement. If you wish to use copyrighted material from this program for purposes beyond fair use, you must obtain permission from the copyright owner. If you believe your copyrighted material has been used in this program in a way that does not qualify as fair use, please contact us at preservationoaks@gmail.com. Thank you.